Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's executive. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies.
No. Councillor Coombs still to come? Okay. Okay. She's actually sort of surpassed herself. Councillor Hughes is here before her. Okay, do we have any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. The first item is the minute of the meeting of the 18th of February. All agreed? Okay, thank you. Item 4 is the rolling action log. Appears to be everything in progress. Just to very briefly draw your attention to 468 on participatory budgeting. We had expected to have something coming forward to this meeting. However, there's guidance to come from COSLA in relation to participatory budgeting. And we felt, I don't know, I've got the right teeth in just about, that we felt it would be more prudent to hold off until we get the guidance and then come back to members at that point, although there is a fair bit of work ongoing around all of that at the moment. Is there anything else on the rolling action log do you wish us to raise? No, thank you.
I genuinely forget, but is there something in the current year's budget for it?
There is £1 million in this year's budget for participatory budgeting.
I think community choices must be
Yeah, community choice is much better. It's what we've called it locally in the past. Yeah. And because we've obviously got a statutory duty to bring that in around 1% of our budget and going forward. So there is a need to bring forward a scheme by which we can take that forward and make that available to communities.
Okay, thank you.
I noticed that 517, the TIF, was supposed to report in February, but it's been delayed till May.
Yes. Mrs. Geisler, do you want to give an update on that?
Yes, this relates to the developer agreement that we are currently negotiating for the Gateway site, and that's not progressed as quickly as we had anticipated, and therefore the report will come forward in May to members.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll move the referral from the Corporate Partnership Forum. Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you, Convener. This is a referral from the Corporate Partnership Forum, which met at the beginning of February. There are 2 recommendations for members to consider. Paragraph 2.1 asks members to approve the implementation of changes to our family leave policy, and these changes are set out at paragraphs 4.1 to 4.3. These changes come about as a result of changes which have been made at a national level. The recommendation in paragraph 2.2 of the report asks members to note likely legislative changes expected to come in to play in April, and that these are implemented once legislation is passed. There are 2 changes expected as a result of this legislation. The first relates to parental bereavement leave, and details are provided in section 4.4 of the report. The second aspect relates to neonatal leave. On the issue of parental bereavement leave, it suggested that we go beyond the likely legislation, both in terms of the rates of pay that we make and also the age limit to which this policy is applied. And if members agree to this, then we will develop the appropriate guidance once the legislation is known to us. So the recommendations, Convener, are set out in section 2 for members to consider this morning. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Stuart. I think that no one could disagree with having to take a very sensitive view to the particular issues that's been highlighted around bereavement leave and neonatal leave. And I'm aware that there's been an element of managed discretion, but I think that obviously that depends on your manager. I would like to hope that everybody would take a similar empathetic view in situations like this. But I think this just gives clarity and gives them permission to be able to give that necessary leave. And obviously, if there's any further aspects of legislation, then we would look to certainly implement that. This has been before the trade union group, and they're content with it. Is that correct, Stuart?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm happy to move the paper and the recommendations to the changes. Any other member?
Could I ask just a procedural point? Where does the forum fit into the hierarchy of consultation with trade unions? It seems, does that double up on the tripartite meeting?
I'll let Stuart explain the tripartite and the partnership and how they operate together.
Yeah, thanks. Tripartite tends to deal with strategic issues, so it will be discussions around budgets, discussions around roadshows that the trade unions are doing with their members, discussions around partnership agreements that we'll be looking to enter into with the trade unions. Corporate Partnership Forum will look at absence management, vacancy management, terms and conditions of service, various policies which are being reviewed. It has no decision making powers. It's there just purely as a consultation forum, and then if the unions agree to the changes in policies, etc., then it comes to this committee for members to consider.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Banks?
I'm obviously happy to second this. This is something that I've been aware of for quite a long time. I know there's been a certain amount of management flexibility. It's good to see it actually potentially becoming something more formal, which especially the bereavement of parents and the neonatal parents is something which I think is going to be a great help to our staff at possibly the worst times that they could possibly have in their life.
Thank you. Are we all agreed? Yeah. Item 6 is Council of the Future, the update report. Stuart?
Yes, thank you, Convener. This report has a look in the rear view mirror and looks at what has happened on Council of Future Change Programme since we last reported in October, but also looks forward as well and points to the review of the business plan, which will be considered by Council in May. We remind members in Section 3 that Wave 2 of the Council of the Future programme was launched as part of the Council's 5-year business plan, considered by this committee in May last year. That also allowed us to have that longer term view of our financial plan and the transformation deliverables within it. We took the opportunity to refresh the Council of Future governance framework, and we've now got a framework which has got 5 cross-cutting work streams: digital, enabled communities, services of the future, transformational enablers and entrepreneurial services. Over 50 projects which are included within these 5 work streams, the granular detail of which was included in the report that came to this committee in October of last year and was also included within the budget report considered by Council a few weeks or so ago. We remind members in Section 3.4 that any decisions requiring member approval will be brought forward to the Executive or Council as appropriate. And in that respect, somewhere in the region of £6 million of the savings that members agreed in the budget a couple of weeks or so are deliverable through the Council of the Future Change Programme. Section 4 then starts to look at the change programme itself, and we have identified, as members know, a top 10 priority list of projects, which I suppose is really a top 8 if you take the 3 big education projects and roll them into the overarching Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow. So paragraph 4.1 of the report sets out as a reminder to members a bit of a pen portrait on these critical transformation projects with a bit of narrative describing each of the projects, and I'll not go into that narrative in detail. Section 4.2 of the report then looks at why these transformation projects are critical, and we say a wee bit about each of these top 10 projects. But I think in summary it's about building capacity in our communities, it's about creating a modern learning environment for our children, it's about transforming our services in terms of roads, grounds maintenance and environmental services to make them fit for purpose moving forward. It's about transforming our property estate through the SPR, and it's about providing digital capacity to improve efficiency and dealing with the council, both in terms of its internal customers and its external customers. Section 4.3 of the report just highlights some of the deliverables that there have been so far with these critical projects, and section 4.4 of the report picks up on the fact that not only are these significant projects in terms of the transformation of the services that they will deliver, but they're also critical to the success of our business plan, with collectively these projects forecast to deliver over £20 million in the 5-year period from 1920 through to 23-24, and we've tried to exemplify that in the pie chart that appears in the appendix. We talk about the reporting arrangements for the change programme in section 4.6 of the report. So I mentioned earlier there will be a refresh of the business plan coming to the council in May. As you know, we have the regular updates to this committee in respect of the work on the programme. On a 6-monthly basis, there's a report to Audit Committee dealing with the risk issues associated with the change programme. And then we've got the Council of the Future Board involving representatives from the 3 political parties, Make It Happen board chief officers and SROs from the 5 work streams, the 5 work stream boards themselves, and then we've got the project managers and sponsors. Section 4.7 of the report just picks up on what the work of the Council of the Future Board has been since we last reported in October, and then we go on to talk about the various sessions and seminars that have been run for elected members since October, and details of those are set out in section 5.3 of the report, and members will be aware that we're now into our stride of holding monthly briefing sessions for elected members, part of the time set over to Council of the Future projects. We finish off convener at 6.2 of the report, talking about the resources that are required to deliver on the business plan and the transformation projects, and members will be aware that monies were set aside in the current budget to create a change fund, £1 million. So we've taken the opportunity in this report just to provide a summary in an appendix of how that change fund has been allocated, and we are on course to have fully committed that £1 million going forward. So that's a very brief summary, convener, of the change programme, the progress that we have made and the direction of travel through to the council meeting in May. Recommendations are set out in section 2 of the report. I'm happy to answer questions that members have.
Thank you, Stuart. When this Council of the Future and the Change Programme was set up, it was essentially recognised that we can't continue the way we've been going, particularly around budgeting, that we needed to look to maintain and protect as many services as possible. And in doing that, we had to perhaps change the way we delivered those particular programmes and maintain as much as we can, particularly focusing on the front line and the face-to-face around our most vulnerable, and facilitating those that can help themselves in other ways. And we have made significant progress on that and changing our services, but we are on a journey. But each year, as part of that programme, we have delivered significant savings. And that's something that's helped us meet our financial gaps in the past. Projects here were agreed in October 19, but we now have had some decisions made at the budget, and there's going to be some implications for this programme. First of all, obviously a reduced change fund, and what that will then be able to deliver by transformation going forward. But also reducing the number of projects that can go forward. And there's a further complication with some of the capital funds, the enabling works that actually will be able to deliver on these projects not being available. So I was going to ask a wee bit more about the implications of that and around the budget, particularly around the Connected Falkirk, our educational programme. My understanding that the decision that was made at the budget doesn't actually enable the service to take forward the programme because it was only a single year funding, and because there's a need to procure, particularly in the first year, that this may all now have to be delayed. I'm just really looking for some comment on that.
Yeah, the position is that much of the enabling works, particularly to do with Wi-Fi installation, would be planned to be progressed over the course of the summer. So in order to complete the procurement process, which has been teed up and is ready to go, there is a requirement for some certainty that the money is going to be there, because we can't procure without knowing that Council has agreed the funding. If the funding isn't agreed formally before the summer, then there would be a delay to the procurement process, which would mean it's much more likely that the project wouldn't be rolled out for another calendar year. So it is imperative, I believe, that we can get a formal Council decision on the funding so that we don't get into that delayed cycle.
And I think members were enthused, having heard the briefing and presentations, about how important this was, particularly for our young people and going forward. And we're a little bit behind in making some of these changes, so we needed to really sort of progress this as quickly as possible. But that for me is a bit of a concern, because we're not doing the best for our young people, and I do wonder if we perhaps need to look at a mechanism where we can revisit some of this and sooner rather than later. Stuart, are you able to make comment around some of the other potential implications, particularly around some of the capital enabling stuff and the projects that are going to give us the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak, and the impact of the improved services as well?
Yeah, thanks. There's a couple of things that you raised, which I'll try and pick up. You spoke about the change fund, so maybe pick up on that. So we are currently working our way through what the resource requirements will be, particularly for these 10 priority projects to deliver the transformation that's required, and the savings that are required next financial year and into the years beyond. So we're probably a couple of weeks away from being able to identify what that resource requirement is. And at that point, we'll come back to the Council of the Future Board to advise them what we think the resource requirements are, the same particular for these top 10 projects. In terms of revenue, a number of transformational savings that were available for members to consider as part of closing the gap. As I mentioned earlier, almost £6 million worth of change savings were accepted, although there was maybe somewhere in the region of £750,000 or so savings which weren't accepted. So that needs to be reflected in the update that goes to Council in May in terms of what the new business plan looks like. As far as capital is concerned, and the capital and the revenue align in some respects. As I said on budget day, we were looking for some capital funding for something like artificial intelligence, just as a bit of seed funding for a proof of concept for savings that we've got in revision benefits further downstream. £200,000 worth of savings, not next year, but the year after and the year after that again. So we'll continue to work on these projects, hopefully in anticipation that at some point we do get a green light from elected members to proceed. I think the other significant capital project was in relation to the mobile and flexible working, and that's tied in with the SPR and just the IT requirements that will be necessary to support a rationalisation of the property estate. And the other aspect of that was just the intention to give more of our frontline staff the ability to be able to have real-time information when they're dealing with customers. So again, hopefully there's an opportunity down the line for that to come back to members, and hopefully some funding to be allocated there. So I think for these projects, we'll continue to work on them, but it's just the pace of change will not be as quick as it would otherwise have been. But as far as we're concerned, you know, they're not off the table, and we'll continue to do work on them, so that if the opportunity comes for elected members to take different decisions, then we're good to go at that point.
Thank you, Stuart. I think it just demonstrates the lack of foresight at the budget, and the lack of looking at the longer term and going for quick decisions that maybe appear populist, but in fact are actually hampering the council going forward. I would appreciate that if you know, there was an opportunity for a briefing or an update report to come back to members on what the actual implications are on the decisions made at the budget, particularly for the Council of the Future programme going forward, and indeed what could well be taken forward by way of redress as we get to the medium-term financial, the business cases coming back in front of members, because I think that there's been some significant mistakes made in the budget that is going to leave us at risk. On that, I'm happy to move the recommendations, but I would just ask if we could get an update report sooner rather than later, Mr Ritchie, on the implications of the Council of the Future. Councillor Bice.
Can I firstly formally second what exactly and agree with exactly everything you said there. It's got to be remembered that the Council of the Future programmes come from the front line, I think, in education particularly, and no disrespect to the directors, but saying to a rector and a headmistress, actually presenting an idea to take things forward for our children, to make sure they're going to be prepared for everything for the future, was spectacular, to say the least, on what they were doing. And my concern is the exact same as yours, is that the number of things that are not going to happen, which are actually going to put that back, are a major concern going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. When I first read this report and we got to the place where we have work streams, I actually wrote, you know, what are the cost benefits and the measures, and then you find that on page 51 you actually get a pie chart that demonstrates that there are £24 million worth of savings related to these various projects. But I think it would have been easier to read if next to each of these work streams we had the actual costs and the potential benefits, so we could see each one individually. And on the question of the Wi-Fi, I felt that with the digital work stream having been agreed and a very large sum of capital money, that included all the various things around it, and it wasn't part of Council of Future funding as such.
There was a suite of capital works related to Council of the Future, and one of them, because it's wider than just education, is around the Wi-Fi, and that wasn't taken by the opposition.
So that wasn't included in the educational.
No, because it was already hardwired into other projects within the capital programme and the digital work streams.
So it wasn't clear what aspects were included in that 9 million. It was agreed.
Well, I think there was about 4 briefings and individual members approached in relation to that particular programme. So I'm not sure, maybe perhaps members weren't asking the right questions, but there was a lot of engagement with members around that.
Thank you.
Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. The 10 million that we allocated for educational transformation, that's up to Mr Naylor to come forward with a full report on how that should be spent in order that this transformation can take place. So I'll wait for that report. If Mr Naylor says it should be allocated in a certain area for Wi-Fi or whatever it may be, that's up to Mr Naylor to come forward and tell us how it can best be done. We've allocated the funding, and I'm sure Mr Naylor will bring forward a great report to the executive that we can review in order that the kids can have this transformation. So we're not stopping anything, and I don't think scaremongering is very helpful. This is going to be transformative for our children, and we all had the briefings and we saw the effects that it can have on education. So that's why it was allocated, and I'm sure we'll get a quality report and it will go forward. Thank you.
I think that what you've not understood, Councillor Bissett, is what was contained within the programme, but there was enabling works already available that was part of a wider digital programme that would have been part of what the educational programme would link into. So it's one of those things about getting the biggest bang for your buck right across the board. But by not approving that part of the capital programme, it has and will delay aspects of what Mr Naylor's programme is going forward. And that's what I'm not scaremongering, that is fact. That is fact based on the papers. Mr Moody, you wanted to come in and clarify?
Yes, it's maybe just helpful just to clarify the nature of the decision that was made by the Council in the Budget Capital Programme. And I think Councillor Bissett's correct in saying that the allocation of the 9.6 million was subject to a report being made by Mr Naylor to the Education, Children and Young People Executive. So there is an Education, Children and Young People Executive coming up relatively soon, and it may well be that the report is available for that particular meeting. There's a second stage in the decision, which was an opportunity for Council to review its capital allocations after that report had been to the Education, Children and Young People Executive, and that executive had made its recommendation in relation to the project. But I think it can be seen that if the report comes to the meeting in roughly 3 weeks' time, which is at the end of March, there will be 2 council meetings prior to the summer holidays, which may offer an opportunity to consider that particular project in advance of the summer period, depending on the recommendation of the executive.
Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't going to speak on this, and I certainly don't want to get involved in the budget bun fight that we seem to be having at the moment. I think what we do need to appreciate, though, that it is a hung council, and for the 2 first years of the administration, being in power, they did get the support of the Conservatives. This year, I understand that it's been a change and that it will be an uncomfortable ride for the first wee while. But I think that one of the main things that we did put through in our budget that I have been banging about for years is the zero-based strategy that we have now agreed to put into policy. And I think that one of the most important things about that is that all members buy into it and all officers buy into it. And perhaps if what we seem to be saying here is that, I think I heard you saying that Councillor Bissett didn't understand or that things were missed, then maybe if we get it right next year, there won't be any of this and nobody will be misunderstanding what's going on, because we will all have an oversight of what's going forward into the budget process, and it needs to start. I think I've got a meeting with Stuart this week sometime, and as I said, hopefully all parties, all members and all officers will be involved, and will change the way we do things, and we won't have any of this confusion, and that's in inverted commas, next year.
Just can I clarify, it's not been put into policy zero-based budgeting. There's a report to come back to members for consideration. There's no agreement that we will operate zero-based budgeting at this time, and my own view is that pure zero-based budgeting is very difficult to implement in the public sector, and it may be very difficult to do on a needs-based service delivery. Therefore, I think we need to give it consideration. There may be merits and aspects of zero-based budgeting that the Council can implement, but pure zero-based budgeting is very, very time-consuming, and we could end up setting up a complete new bureaucracy in doing that. So I think that it's right that a report comes forward to members to give consideration to the whole process, and look at what is appropriate for us, and not just make a sweeping statement around that, because I know that there are concerns in other parts about how that could actually be truly delivered on a needs-based service.
I absolutely agree that it's difficult, which is why I've been banging on about it for 5 years and it hasn't happened. But just because something's difficult doesn't mean to say that it's not worth doing. I think we need to make it clear to our staff it's not about cost cutting. What we need to be doing is adding value, because the council doesn't spend money, it spends time. And I think that if we can find a way whereby our staff are using their time far more effectively and efficiently, and get the unions involved, and recognising what we're talking about here with children's services, it needs to be across the board, that we use digitalisation, but we keep it as simple as possible. It is difficult, but I think that's no excuse to walk away from it yet again, because every year we go through the same tango and the same dance, and we end up going round in circles.
Councillor Alexander?
Yes, first of all, it's not Mr Naylor's responsibility to produce an alternative budget for the opposition. He's there to manage the education service. I can understand why we don't want the usual bun fight over the budget, because quite frankly, the more we dig into the alternative budget, the more problems we discover. There does seem to be a lack of understanding, for example, of what constitutes revenue, what constitutes capital. The cut of £500,000 from the alternative budget, with the alternative budget for road maintenance, means fewer potholes. The £7 million capital that's been put in is most members seem to be aware, for strategic matters, heavy capital roads contracts, rather than maintenance. The maintenance will actually go backwards, as will the withdrawal and the cut implemented by the alternative budget, 1.8 million that was to go towards maintenance of some of our properties. So it certainly wasn't the shining light that it was portrayed as at the budget meeting, and there will be more come out in that particular front later. But this particular report relating to the Council for Change. That's it's in the title, Council for Change. And what we've seen is the closing off of options in terms of projects by the cut in the budget from the alternative Freudian slip, the alternative budget proposals put forward by the opposition. And what we have is a situation whereby this particular part of the council could be strangled. Maybe that's the purpose of the alternative budget, to strangle, to stop change, to slow down the process of change. And that's a great pity if that's the case, because this has been led by the staff themselves. And there's no better group to lead that particular process than the staff. So I hope that not only do we see the change that Mrs Coombs seemed to touch on.
Councillor Coombs.
Apologies, Councillor Coombs seemed to touch on. But we'll wait yet to see any evidence that change is a factor in the thinking of the opposition within this particular authority.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alexander. Mr. Laurie's going to say something about the business plans.
Thank you, Convener. I mean, a couple of points, I think. One quite generic and one more specific. I mean, I think there's a broad recognition that the Council of the Future programme is critical for the Council moving forward. There's been, as Stuart said, a number of sessions where we've presented on the various projects. And I think that's been broadly well received. And I'd certainly encourage members to, take advantage of these opportunities, and there will be many more of them. I think we know that whatever else happens, we will still be in a challenging financial position going forward. We know that wherever possible, we want to transform services and drive savings through that route, because the alternative, as members are very well aware, is cuts or reduction in service. And I don't think any of us want that. So the delivery of these projects is critical and will remain a major focus for me and for my colleagues on the management team. I suppose I'm thinking in terms of the projects such as the education project. We've got a report coming forward to the Education, Children and Young People's Executive. That will set out the details of the report and what is required. And we've already said that we're intending to bring the business plan forward to the Council in May. So what is in my mind, Convener, is that if, having reviewed the position in terms of these various critical projects and the funding position, if there are urgent decisions required in relation to funding on the back of that officer analysis, then these could come into the business plan report in May. I mean, the other aspect, of course, is that we will be going back to look at the capital programme on the basis of Scottish Government's Year 2 and 3 funding. We don't know exactly the timing of that, but as I say, one of the ways in which we can perhaps mitigate any issues is to bring forward any specific requirements through the business plan report in May.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nimmo, Councillor Nimmo, sorry.
Thanks, Convener. I mean, quite frankly, I wouldn't expect anything else from an administration that failed to get their budget through. It's to be expected, I suppose. And as you said earlier, you said that you thought there was a lack of foresight. There certainly isn't any lack of foresight in relation to the Labour group. There was a lot of work put into our budget. OK, it was an alternative budget, but we managed to push it through. And I think the public out there understand the reasons why that happened. Certainty for the future? Well, I look forward to Mr Naylor's report coming back in May. I'm sure there'll be a lot of information contained in that. And it was mentioned about the setting of the budget. Elected members set the budget, not directors. They manage the service funds on behalf of elected members and make sure it's spent appropriately. Directors don't set the budget, we do.
And I don't think anyone said that, well, certainly not from our side, that set the budget, but we do take advice and listen to them, We don't always agree with them, but we do take advice, and on a number of occasions that has proved to be very, very fruitful for this authority. So I think we need to be very careful about you know, what we are saying, and that we are getting very good advice from our officials right now about our budget situation. And as you heard Mr Laurie talk about having to look to mitigate our decisions as we come forward to what potentially could be a spending review for the council in May. So I think that gives an indication of exactly what the point I was trying to make, that there's some poor decisions made at the budget. On that, if there's no amendment to the report, can we accept the report?
Could I just get back to the report itself? It's got kind of lost
apologies
in the
that
budget
Councillor
fog somewhere. Yeah. I think, as we expect from the authoress, this is a very good report, very crisp, very concise. And Council of the Future is doing what it's set out to do, that is transform the council. For the first time, we're seeing talent emerge from the underneath the pyramid instead of the top of the pyramid, which was the old practice. And it's quite refreshing to go to meetings to see people who are just names to us, but are coming up with very, very good ideas. About the cut from $1 million to $500,000 for the Council of the Future, I would have thought by now that some of these practices will have been embedded into our services, and this kind of esprit that exists is now prevalent, and therefore sometimes they might even use their own budgets to carry out these things instead of coming to the Council of the Future. That's one aspect. It's one of the few meetings, I must confess, that I look forward to nowadays. It's quite inspirational, actually, without overdoing the adjectives. I think that probably I'm not alone in getting bombarded with emails from a certain quarter about an event in London, I think, about transformational, inviting councils to apply. I don't know if officers have picked that one up or not, because I'm fairly sure, having looked at the different categories, we would have been in the running for some of them. But I take it you've had the same thing, Cecil.
Yeah, there's a number of transformational funds, and we do have regular bids in around that, particularly around our digital, looking at various funding streams to be able to assist in that.
Yeah. Just going back briefly to the budget, it was done in the worst of circumstances, I've said repeatedly, and hopefully the air will clear eventually.
Can I just a comment on what you've said there, Councillor Reid, in that for the investment of around £1 million last year, we got around 5-6 return. So in a way, they are using their own budget. It just gives that enabling funded pump prime money in order to get the income, and I think there will be an optimum point where we don't need to look at putting at that same level of enabling money in, but we're some way from that with some of the projects going forward. And I think what we have now is we've put a limiter on it, particularly around the pace. And some of the decisions that's been made. However, there's an opportunity for members to reconsider that going forward, and hopefully common sense will prevail at that point. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 7, which is assets surplus to requirement, land adjacent to the Department of Works and Pensions, Calendar Gate, Calendar Business Park, Falkirk. Mrs Geisler.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Hopefully this will be brief and straightforward. As the report says, a building in Calendar Business Park owned by Trillium Prime Property Limited and occupied by DWP and the Child Support Agency, they have inadvertently encroached on part of land owned by the council and have asked the council if they can acquire this site to regularise the position. They've actually asked to acquire a larger area, just really to sort out the boundary. As you can see from the plan, the boundary is a bit odd at the moment, and they're just hoping to sort that out. District Valuer has valued the site at £25,000 based on the circumstances that I've described, and it's proposed that members agree to this disposal for that sum. It's worth mentioning that children will require to apply separately for planning permission for a change of use, which will be dealt with through the normal planning channels. So the recommendation, as I say, is to agree to dispose of the site on that basis. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Eisler. Councillor Alexander?
Yeah, quite happy to go with the recommendations. Convener, the figure of 25,000 seems reasonable once it was explained. I thought it was a wee bit short, but then I was thinking the UK government tell us a wee bit short. So the joke. We're happy to move the recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to second.
Right, thank you. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, we move to exclusion of the public. So thank you, Kirsty. Bit of a lighter day than yesterday.